If we're not careful, tonight could unravel more than just a few secrets. His gaze traveled across her face, lingering on her lips as if they held the promise of revelations untold. The space between them charged, a magnetic field heavy with unspoken possibilities. Cleo felt her heart hammer as her pulse raced against the backdrop of a world on the brink of chaos. And what if we want it to? She teased, feeling braver than ever. Malik's lips quirked into a half smile, dark and enticing. Then we might just set the night ablaze. With every heartbeat, the night unfurled, embracing them both in a tantalizing dance of danger and desire. Cleo stepped closer, emboldened by the temptation of rebellion. Whatever awaited them, she would face it head-on, not just by his side, but forged in the heat of their undeniable connection. Scene 22. Falling deeper. The evening air was thick with humidity, wrapping itself around Cleo like a heavy shawl. The last remnants of daylight clung to the horizon as storm clouds brewed overhead, mirroring the turmoil that twisted in her heart. Each hesitant clink of glasses in the dimly lit parlor rang out sharply, a reminder of the laughter that played beneath strained tensions. Outside, the faint rumble of thunder whispered threats of a tempest, echoing the brewing conflict within. Cleo perched on the edge of an ornate chair, tapping her fingers against the gilded armrest as she stole glances at Malik. He stood across the room, a striking silhouette framed by the flickering candlelight, his features unreadable but intense. The tension between them had shifted. The air crackled with unspoken words, the fragile barrier of friendship taut and threatening to snap. "Cleo," Malik said, his voice low and smooth, tinged with an urgency that made her heart race. "We can't keep dancing around this. You know I'm not just your fiancé's brother." Her heart pounded against her ribcage, louder than the distant thunder. "Do you think I don't know that?" she replied, her voice sharper than she intended, laced with a nervous energy. She stood, drawing a breath deep enough to fill her lungs, the scent of sandalwood and rain mingling in the air. "You're not the only one trying to navigate this chaos." A storm erupted outside, wind lashing at the windows. Cleo cast a glance toward the panes, the rain beginning to streak down like tears. "It's all so complicated." Malik stepped closer, breaking the physical distance, his presence engulfing her like the approaching storm. "Complicated?" he repeated, a hint of disbelief coloring his tone. "You're about to be shackled to a man who doesn't appreciate your worth. Don't you see how dangerous that is?" Cleo felt the weight of his words sink in, a storm of emotions battling inside. "So what? You expect me to succumb to just any man with kind words and an agenda?" He stepped even closer, now mere inches away. The heat radiating from him felt like a third presence in the room, pushing against the churning air. "I'm saying you deserve more than the safety of a gilded cage." The intensity of his gaze held her captive. She could see the flicker of something deeper in his eyes, a fierce longing cloaked behind layers of concern. This was the vulnerability that had eluded her, a glimpse of the man beneath his careful facade, twisted by loyalty and shadowed by guilt. "Why do you care?" Cleo asked, her voice barely above a whisper, the distance shrinking as their breaths mingled in the charged space. "You have your own path." "Because I see you, Cleo," Malik confessed, his voice a thick murmur as he stepped forward, the storm's growl fading into the background. "And I can't bear to watch you drown in disinterest. No one should have that power over you." Overwhelmed, she felt the walls around her heart begin to crumble. The storm outside heightened her senses. The bitter scent of rain on earth, the cool touch of the approaching wind, and the thundering pulse resonating in her chest, urging her toward him. "Malik," but the words caught in her throat, uncertainty coiling around her as she gazed into the depths of his dark eyes. Here stood a man who had shielded her in shadows, even as his own weighed heavily on his soul. "What if I chose wrong again? Then I will stand beside you and help you untangle the truth." His voice was a soothing balm, yet charged with something electric and raw, pulling her closer into his orbit. "I want to be there to help you at any cost." Malik reached out, his fingers tracing the delicate line of her jaw, grounding her with a tender touch that spoke volumes. The world around her faded, leaving only the two of them, suspended in the eye of the storm. "Cleo," he murmured, the weight of her choice hanging in the air between them, "the question is not about wrong or right. It's about what sets your soul free. As thunder crashed in the distance, she surrendered to the truth in his words, the tantalizing taste of vulnerability on her lips. "And what if that is you?" she breathed, her heart racing, breathless with the thrill of unknown possibilities. "Then I'll fight for you," he replied, resolve glimmering in his eyes. "Always." In that moment, lightning flashed, illuminating the intensity between them, and Cleo understood she was ready to drop her guard, not just against him, but against the tumult that had defined her life. The storm raged outside, but in their shared silence, a new promise began to take shape. Scene 23. Enemies in disguise. The sun dipped low in the sky, casting a warm golden light that flickered through the intricate latticework of the estate's balcony. Flowers climbed in delicate rebellion, whose sweet fragrance mingled with the earthy scent of freshly tilled dirt below. Cleo stood there, tension swirling through her veins, feeling both the beauty of the waning day and the turmoil that churned inside her. The weight of her engagement loomed larger than ever, a dark cloud blotting out the shimmering horizon. "Have you ever wondered what is hidden beneath the surface?" Malik's voice sliced through the evening stillness, sounding almost like a whisper carrying dangerous secrets. He stepped closer, his shadow intertwining with hers, fusing the palpable heat of his presence with her rising emotional tide. Cleo arched an eyebrow, her resolve flaring. "If you are talking about Whitmore's supposed charm, then yes, I've seen too much to take his facade at face value." The memory of his cold, dismissive gaze sent a shiver up her spine. Malik crossed his arms, the tension in his body coiling tighter. "There's darkness there, Cleo, the kind that spreads like an infection when left unchecked." He leaned against the wrought iron railing. "I've uncovered some troubling details about his dealings." She turned sharply, curiosity piqued despite a surge of conflict. "What details?" Her heart raced, the prospect of information being a double-edged sword sharp against her conscience. "Import and export routes that aren't merely trade," he stated, his eyes narrowing. "Whitmore's been meeting with some unsavory characters. We need to tread carefully. It's dangerous." Cleo's chest tightened, ambition ignited in her like wildfire. "Dangerous? I'm already standing on the precipice." She took a step closer to him, the intensity of her voice bouncing off the stone walls encasing them. "I won't shy away from it, not when it involves justice." Malik's gaze flickered, admiration battling unease as he held her gaze. "Justice often blurs the lines, Cleo. You could ending up with the truth is what matters." She cut him off, determination fueling her words, her spirit alive with a defiance she never knew she possessed. The air between them thickened, every heartbeat hammering a rhythm that echoed their unspoken connection. Malik's eyes darkened. Whatever walls he had built seemed to crack under the weight of the moment. "You shouldn't underestimate the danger lurking in the shadows, especially when it could cost you everything." His foreboding words hung in the air, but Cleo felt emboldened. "Or it could liberate me," she dared, stepping even close enough to feel the heat radiating from him, to catch the faint scent of sandalwood and musk. Silence enveloped them, pregnant with the tension of their unuttered fears. Malik's breath stilled, but it was Cleo who broke the cocooned quiet. "What if I don't want saving? What if I want to hack through the strands of danger myself?" His expression shifted, his vulnerability momentarily exposed, as if she'd gleaned the truth from him. "Then you'd better be prepared for the consequences." In that charged moment, her heart pounded, a frantic reminder of her pulse, of life, of choice. "I am." Her voice was a gentle caress, inviting but laced with an undercurrent of something deeper. Malik reached out, brushing a stray curl behind her ear, his fingers lingering against her skin, a spark igniting beneath his touch. "Cleo." Time stretched, as though the universe held its breath. She tilted her chin up, drawing him nearer, their faces only inches apart. The world around them faded, leaving only the two of them suspended in a moment of uncertainty and yearning. Then, without words, they leaned in, lost in a rush of warmth as their lips met softly, gradually building in intensity, a storm gathering force. Cleo's heartbeat quickened, a melody of passion thrumming through her. He tasted of daring and danger, coaxing her to abandon caution, to surrender to whatever unseen force drew them together. But just as their connection reached a crescendo, the snap of a nearby branch shattered the stillness between them. They pulled apart, breathless, reality crashing back in, yet their souls were now indelibly intertwined. Malik stepped back then, looking at her with a mix of longing and urgency. We need to figure this out, together. Cleo steadied her pulse, determination crystallizing. The darkness of Whitmore awaited, but so did the alluring promise of the fire they had ignited together. Then let's begin. In that fragile balance of light and shadow, they exchanged resolved glances, allies transformed into something far more dangerous, yet undeniably powerful. Scene 24. Shadows of betrayal. The flickering candlelight danced against the silk-woven curtains, casting erratic shadows that mirrored the turmoil swirling inside Cleo's heart. She paced across the lavish room, her thoughts a storm of doubt and suspicion about Prince Whitmore. Just moments before, he had sworn his loyalty, his affection, but the darkness in his eyes led her to believe a more insidious betrayal lurked beneath the surface. As the weight of his words hung heavily in the air, her fingers brushed against the delicate lace of her gown. The silky fabric felt both familiar and foreign, a reminder of the life she was expected to lead, yet so detached from the truth of her own heart. Her breath hitched. She wanted nothing more than to shake off the pretense and confront the reality dawning upon her. Malik stood silently in the corner, a brooding figure amidst the elegance of the decor. The way the light caught his resolute features made him look almost spectral, a looming protector in her moment of anguish. Her heart fluttered at his presence, igniting a complexity of feelings, fear, desire, and an unyielding need for his strength. "Why do you let him speak to you like that?" Malik's voice broke the silence, low and filled with an edge of frustration. He stepped forward, closing the distance between them. Cleo met his gaze, the smoldering intensity in his eyes sending a shiver up her spine. "He speaks of devotion, yet I feel deceived. Is it wrong for me to question his intentions?" "Not wrong, dangerous," he replied, his tone firm yet laced with an undercurrent of tenderness that made her pulse quicken. "You need to know what you're truly up against." The warmth of his body drew closer, the tension between them palpable. Cleo's mind whirled with thoughts of what could be, their lips inches apart, the possibility of a stolen moment, so magnetic and yet frightfully complicated. She opened her mouth, ready to speak, but the fog of uncertainty stifled her. He brushed a strand of hair behind her ear, his touch sending a jolt of electricity through her. "You deserve more than deceptive charms, Cleo. You deserve honesty," he murmured, his voice nearly a whisper. The sincerity in his eyes seemed to fracture her defenses, revealing a flicker of trust that she had buried deep within. In that suspended moment, the world outside faded. Cleo stepped instinctively closer, her heart racing. "What if honesty shatters everything I thought I knew?" She dared not move away, captivated by his presence, the husky timbre of his voice, and the unspoken desire thrumming in the silence. His hand lingered at her waist, his fingers grazing the silk, each pass igniting a fire that felt simultaneously freeing and terrifying. "Then we rebuild together," he said, the promise of his words a midnight vow, threading through the air with a warmth that enveloped her. Unable to resist, she leaned in, closing the distance that separated them. Their lips met softly at first, a tentative exploration, each moment stretching into eternity. As the kiss deepened, it exploded with a fervor that unraveled more than just her fears. It connected them in a shared vulnerability, a rawness that transcended their tragic pasts. Cleo melted against him, feeling the strength in his hands as they anchored her in place. Time slipped away, and the haunting doubts surrounding Whitmore fell away, leaving only the warmth of Malik's breath and the softness of his lips. But even as her heart soared with newfound hope, a shadow lingered, always at the edge of her mind, threatening to pull her back to the harsh realities awaiting outside this haven. As they broke apart, the silence hung thick, charged with unspoken fears and growing desires. Cleo searched Malik's eyes, confidence rising within her yet tempered by the weight of her reality. "What if this isn't what we both want?" she breathed, feeling both exhilarated and terrified. Malik's gaze held her steady. "Then it's a risk worth taking." And in that moment, beneath the flickering candlelight, Cleo felt fear's grip loosen, replaced by the dizzying blend of danger and desire. The night was still young, but the shadows of betrayal loomed closer than ever. Scene 25. Alliance of the Heart. Cleo stared at the stack of freshly ironed linens piled on the hallway table, their crispness a stark contrast to the storm brewing in her heart. The fragrance of lavender from the vases lining the walls wafted through the air, mingling with the distant rumble of thunder. Each crack echoed the tumult within her as she adjusted the lace tablecloth with delicate precision. Every fold and crease distracted her, but none so much as the thought of Whitmore discarded in the corners of her mind, like the laundry she had yet to wash out of her life. As the rain began to patter against the windows, she could hear the distant thunderclaps nudging her thoughts into sharp focus. Moments with Malik returned to haunt her with their powerful intimacy. His haunted gaze lingered in the shadows of her memory, a contrast to her roiling confusion. Placing her hands on the table, Cleo leaned forward, the cool surface grounding her spiraling thoughts. She had no choice but to forge an alliance with him, a partnership that could untangle the web of darkness encroaching on her life. The door creaked open, breaking her reverie. Malik stepped in, his presence unfolding like a storm cloud, heavy and charged with tension. He shook off the raindrops from his coat, droplets cascading like quicksilver onto the floorboards. She caught a glimpse of the way his brow furrowed, eyes scanning her with a hint of concern, the air thickening with unspoken words. "Did you get caught out there?" Cleo asked, her voice steady but edged. She moved to the fire, stirring the embers into a flickering dance, flames licking upward with a warmth that both comforted and urged her heart to rise. "I might have underestimated the storm," Malik replied, his tone light, but the gravity of the moment flickered between them. He stepped closer, the light from the fire casting shadows across his sharp features, creating an intimacy that felt electric. "We need to talk," she said, cutting through the playful banter that typically underscored their interactions. The earnestness in her voice caught his attention. "About Whitmore?" Malik asked, his expression shifting as he took a step closer, his warmth radiating toward her. The air now seemed charged. The rain tapping insistently on the window echoed their shared urgency. Cleo nodded, her resolve solidifying. "I can't trust him anymore. He has ties that bind him to this darkness, and I'm tired of being dragged into it. I can't be the pawn in his game any longer." Malik's gaze was steady, flickering with an understanding deeper than words could express. "Then let's become partners in this, Cleo. We can ride this storm out together." "Together?" She mimicked, a hint of defiance in her smile as she challenged his certainty. "What do you think that looks like? Us against the world?" Malik stepped even closer, the space between them practically crackling with tension. "Perhaps it looks like a well-worn table with fresh plans unfolding across its surface, new linens draped with hope, images that eclipse old shadows." His voice softened, becoming more intimate. "Or maybe it begins with trust." His proximity sent a shiver along her spine, and the scent of rain mingled with his cologne, a heady mix of cedar and something she couldn't quite place, something undeniably appealing. "What if we trust the wrong person again?" Cleo asked, her bravado on the edge of breaking. The flickering light of the fire illuminated Malik's eyes, revealing the tumult beneath. "Then we adapt, we break and mend. We do not walk away, we fight." The raw sincerity in his eyes sparked something within her, and she inhaled deeply, savoring the moment, the intimacy forged in uncertainty. "And what if I fall into the dark again?" she whispered, suddenly vulnerable. "Then I'll pull you out," he promised, his voice strong, a comforting balm against her uncertainty. "You won't fall alone." Cleo felt the weight of Malik's words wrap around her like a warm embrace, steady and reassuring. "I suppose we have a deal then," she said, a soft smile breaking through her defensiveness. As the rain pattered more fiercely outside, it blurred the world beyond the window, isolating them in their moment. They were two figures amid the chaos, somehow balanced on the precipice of trust and uncertainty. Malik leaned closer, the warmth of his presence wrapping around her like a shield. Together, they stood at the edge of a storm prepared not only to face the tumult outside, but also the truth simmering within their uncharted alliance. Scene 26. The perfect storm. The wind howled through the narrow streets of Elmsworth, rattling the shutters against the aging brick buildings that flanked them, a storm brewing both outside and within. Dark clouds hung low, heavy with the promise of rain, as Cleo Seke leaned against the rough stone wall of the secluded courtyard. The air crackled with the tension of unspoken words. It was the kind of place where secrets festered and dreams dared not linger too long. With the fading light, she glanced at Malik Orpheus, his tall, commanding figure appearing like a dark silhouette against the turbulent sky. His gaze was fixed on the horizon, brow furrowed as if he could see the chaos approaching. Cleo's heart raced, not from fear of the tempest, but from the weight of the unsaid that she felt looming between them, a tightly coiled spring begging to be unwound. "Are we simply to stand here, waiting for the inevitable?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper, the salty tang of the approaching storm mixing with the tension in the air. Malik turned, the flicker of determination lighting his eyes. "There was a time when waiting bore its own strength," he replied, his tone calm yet laced with urgency. "But now we act before the storm finds us." "And what does that mean for us?" Her arms crossed tightly as she spoke, a physical barrier against the rising passion she felt. "Do you see a path forward in this chaos of scandal and secrets?" "To endure the storm, we must first confront what we hide," he replied, taking a step closer, the distance between them charged with an electricity that felt alive. "Will you speak your truth, Cleo? Or must we dance around it forever?" The words hung in the air like raindrops suspended before their release. Cleo swallowed hard, feeling the weight of her own silence, a silence born from a life spent manipulating situations to retain control. The thought of revealing herself, of tearing down her defenses, sent a tremor of uncertainty through her. "You speak of truth, Malik, yet we are ensnared in the very darkness that seeks to swallow us whole. What do we know of each other, really?" She pulled away, her arm brushing against the rough stone, grounding her in reality even as her heart soared against her will. Malik's expression softened and he mirrored her motion, creating an intimate space around them, away from the edges of the world that felt too harsh, too raw. "I know you are stronger than you show. I sense the fire in you that drives your ambitions and fears alike, just as I bear my own shadows." "But your shadows," she replied sharply, "shroud the truth I seek. You are the brother of a man I was to marry, only to have that future flash away like mist in the dawn. Can you blame me for questioning your loyalty, your intentions?" He stepped closer, closing the gap she had instigated, and the air thickened around them. "You confuse loyalty with protection, Cleo. I do not wish to deceive you. I wish to shield you from the very storms that haunt us. It is not only your heart I wish to protect, but your life." She took a deep breath, steadying her resolve as a flicker of the street lamp illuminated the granite in his eyes, revealing depths of passion masked by burden and regrets. "And what if I do not want to be shielded? What if I wish to weather the storm, whatever that may bring?" His lips curled into a bittersweet smile, the shift of his demeanor sending ripples of warmth through her chest. "Then perhaps we are more alike than I thought, for I shall stand beside you, whether we are fighting the tempest or embracing its wildness." The wind gusted again, this time carrying the first crack of thunder, rumbling ominously in the distance. It was the sound of impending change, an echo of the emotions swirling silently between them. Cleo moved forward, emboldened, a pulse of recklessness coursing through her. As she did, Malik met her halfway, their hesitation clearing like the clouds above. "Cleo," he began softly, a gravity to his voice that both grounded and thrilled her, "whatever darkness lies ahead, let us share it together." In that moment, the barriers that had kept them apart crumbled. Their souls whispered against the convergence, tender yet perilous, familiar yet uncharted. She grasped his hand impulsively, feeling the strength there, steadying her amidst the tempest. "Together," she echoed, feeling the storm break over them as they stood defiantly against it, entwined by thoughts and emotions that promised more than mere survival. Scene 27. Seeking answers. The velvet curtains of Cleo's drawing room hung heavy, absorbing the muted light from the overcast afternoon sky. Shadows danced along the ornately patterned wallpaper, creating a tableau of tension that clung thick in the air. The scent of polished wood and lingering lavender played tricks with Cleo's mind, transporting her back to simpler times before the weight of unanswered questions bore down on her. She paced the room, the whisper of her satin skirts reverberating softly against the marbled floor, a stark contrast to her pounding heart. Malik stood by the fireplace, his silhouette framed by the flickering light of the flames. His gaze was locked on the crackling logs, yet Cleo felt as though he were a million miles away, the distance between them fraught with unspoken truths. She stopped pacing, hands clenched into fists by her sides, and turned toward him, her brow furrowed with determination. "Malik," Cleo said, forcing her voice to remain steady, "we need to talk. I can't keep pretending that I don't know something is terribly wrong." His head turned slowly, the flicker of the fire catching the sharp lines of his profile as he faced her, his expression unreadable. A muscle in his jaw clenched, and she could see the internal battle writ large against his otherwise calm demeanor. He began, but the word hung in the air, taut with anticipation. "No," she interjected, desperation fueling her resolve. "This isn't about decorum or subtlety. I need you to tell me what you know about my mother's death. This silence is suffocating." Malik's shoulders squared, and in an instant the warmth of their past conversations dissipated into a frigid, uncharted territory. He crossed to the large bay window, staring out at the garden where the late blooms of summer clashed vibrantly against the waning sunlight. "Sometimes ignorance is a blessing, Cleo," he replied softly, but his voice was like sandpaper, rough and candid. "You don't want to dive into the heart of darkness. There are things buried that should remain buried." "But I need to know," she shouted, the sound reverberating across the room, echoing the desperation clawing at her insides. "I deserve the truth about what happened to her, to us that night. You were there. You saw it." He stepped back from the window, the shadow of his frame deepening. "You're not ready for this. The world we're entwined in is a labyrinth of danger. Inviting those truths in is a perilous gamble." Cleo's breath hitched, a wave of hurt washing over her. "Stop treating me like I'm fragile. I'm not some porcelain doll to be kept on a shelf. If I'm going to escape this poisonous engagement, I need to understand the past. No more secrets." She took a step toward him, her heart racing as the gravity of the moment pressed down on them. Malik's gaze snapped to hers, a flash of vulnerability breaking through his stoic facade. "Do you think the truth will protect you? Do you believe understanding will shield you from the horror of it all?" His voice grew taut, and she could sense a storm brewing beneath his surface. "Your mother's death, it was a tragedy wrapped in betrayal, covered by people who should have loved her." The air between them crackled, both charged and haunted. Cleo could see the truth in his eyes, an almost panicked fear of unleashing the darkness tethered to their families. "Then tell me what you know. Don't you see? I need to know the truth, not just for her, but for myself. I refuse to let fear decide my fate any longer." Malik approached her, closing the distance, his eyes ablaze with conflict. Their breaths mingled, charged with the weight of their shared past and the uncertainty of their intertwined futures. He hesitated, the air thick with unsaid words, ripe with tension, yet flickering with something softer beneath. "I have protected you for so long, but I can't shield you from every storm," he murmured, his voice dropping to a bare whisper. "Sometimes protection means letting you face the tempest." Cleo's heart pounded as each word resonated like a bell tolling in the stillness. Emotions swirled: fear, anticipation, yearning. "Then let me make my own choice, Malik. Just give me the first truth. Just one." For a suspended moment, neither of them moved, the world outside forgotten, the fire crackling a distant memory. Then he stepped closer still, his hand brushing against hers, electric. "Very well," he said slowly, the weight of his words hanging in the air, heavy yet liberating. "But be prepared, for not all truths liberate." The intensity of their connection sparked, a flicker of intimacy that tangled with their looming confrontation. The journey ahead promised danger, but in this charged moment, she felt only the urgency to unravel the threads binding them to a tragic past. Scene 28. An explosive confrontation. The candlelight flickered precariously in the dimly lit back room of the Gilded Serpent, its golden inscriptions barely illuminating Cleo's tense features. "Why did you invite them?" Cleo whispered, her voice barely a flutter against the murmur of nearby patrons. Malik's dark eyes narrowed, a tense resolve tightening in the corners of his mouth. "I needed to draw Whitmore out. He won't rest until he gets what he wants." The weight of unspoken thoughts hung between them, a dance of tension under the surface, crackling with the palpable threat of chaos. Outside, a sudden shout shattered the evening's lull. Cleo's heart raced, her pulse a wild drum in the silence that followed, punctuated only by the distant sounds of revelry. It felt like the air had become thicker, alive with an electric current. No, this was not part of the plan, she breathed, apprehension dousing her bravado. We don't have a choice. Malik reached for her wrist, his fingers warm and firm, and she shivered at the contact. We need to go now. A cruel laugh echoed from the doorway, the voice unmistakably belonging to Whitmore. Running again, Malik? Is that your only defense? He stepped into the room, flanked by his brutish followers. The atmosphere shifted, tension rippled amongst the crowd, eyes darting towards the confrontation unfolding. Malik's grip tightened on Cleo's wrist, pulling her closer. Stay behind me, he commanded, the low rumble of his voice radiating both danger and a fierce protectiveness that sent heat coursing through her. She took a breath, her gaze fixed on the menacing figures advancing. Thought you could keep her from me forever? Whitmore taunted, his grin predatory. You lack the courage to face the past, don't you? Just like your mother. With a swift motion, Malik stepped forward, cutting off Whitmore's taunts. If you're looking for a fight, you've found one. His declaration bore a chilling calm, the room holding its breath in anticipation. Cleo could feel the tension crackling like a summer storm, palpable and raw. The onlookers had fallen silent, their drinks forgotten as they fixated on the brewing conflict. Malik, please. She tried to intervene, but her plea was drowned out by Whitmore's laughter. It's entertaining to see you both squirm, Whitmore sneered, his followers snickering as they approached. Perhaps we should turn this into a performance. With a flick of his wrist, Whitmore motioned for his men to advance. The atmosphere ignited, a blaze of adrenaline rushing through Cleo as Malik stepped protectively in front of her, his silhouette a shield against the gathering storm. Your time has come, Whitmore. You'll regret provoking me, he said, his voice low and fervent, fixing the criminal with a glare that carried years of suppressed fury. And then it happened. Violence exploded onto the scene. Malik lunged, a blur of motion and raw power, connecting with Whitmore's jaw, the crack reverberating in the charged air. Cleo gasped, adrenaline surging through her as chaos erupted around them. Fists flew, tables crashed, and shards of glass scattered like the aftermath of a storm. Cleo, get to the door, Malik shouted, the fire of battle igniting the air around him. With every hit, every dodge, it was as if he wove a dangerous dance to protect her. Her heart hammered wildly as she hesitated, torn between her impulse to flee and the magnetic pull of Malik's presence, the man who had stepped into this tumultuous world to shield her with a depth of feeling that neither of them had dared to voice. Go. He turned, catching her gaze, the raw intensity in his eyes igniting something fierce within her. I'll handle this. But Cleo wasn't made of the same stormy fabric as the world around them. She wouldn't allow herself to be a mere spectator. Not without you, she countered, stepping forward, her body rallying behind her words. In that split second, they locked eyes, a burning recognition igniting the air between them, a promise unspoken, yet undeniably present. And just as their world threatened to topple into darkness, wrapped in the chaos of violence and unearthly strength, Malik moved towards her. Every muscle in his body, a storm of pent-up energy. Cleo knew she should turn away, but the fear faded, replaced by the undeniable force of attraction. She lifted herself on tiptoe, placing her palm against his cheek as the tide of disaster surged around them. With a breathless moment suspended in time, they met in a kiss, a collision of desperation and hope, pulling them into the eye of the storm. But just beyond them, the battle roared on, reality clawing for their attention. And even as they tasted the impossible between them, they were acutely aware. A reckoning awaited. It was far from over. Scene 29. Visions of love. The heavy air of the dimly lit drawing room charged with unspoken tension. Cleo Seke stood before the fireplace, its embers glowing like the tumult within her. The distant echoes of laughter from an ongoing soiree swirled around her, a stark contrast to her turbulent thoughts. She could hear Malik's rich voice cutting through the background chatter, mingling warmth with danger. Do you really believe you can negotiate with them? Malik asked, his tone measured but laced with concern. He leaned against the doorframe, the flickering firelight casting shadows across his features, which danced between fierce and tender. Cleo turned away from the flames, locking her gaze on him as a shiver coursed through her. It's not just about negotiation, it's about survival. The defiance in her voice echoed in the silent spaces between her words, a challenge hidden beneath layers of worry. Her heart raced, thoughts colliding chaotically. Memories of her upbringing, the weight of expectations, and the sinister entanglements of crime felt suffocating. Life with Malik had revealed hidden truths about her own strength, yet his presence stirred a longing she wasn't prepared to face. He stepped closer, and the scent of cedar and spice enveloped her, making her breath hitch slightly. But at what cost, Cleo? Are you willing to gamble everything, including your heart? His words hung heavily, each syllable a pinpoint darting into her vision, blurring the lines between reassurance and trepidation. She found herself staring into the depths of his eyes, where the flicker of shadows hinted at battles lost beneath a surface of guarded charm. Cleo felt a constricting pulse in her throat, an ache almost suffocating. I can't afford to feel. He stepped into her space, their bodies instinctively aligning, defying the physical 6 inches that society dictated. Are you sure about that? Malik's voice was softer now, the edge giving way to an unexpected gentleness. You've spent so much time in the dark. Maybe it's time to let someone in. Silence enveloped them, thick and humming. Cleo could feel the heat radiating between them, like the glow of the fire, igniting something deep within her. The distance, physical and emotional, shrank to a mere whisper of air as they stood together, suspended in a moment that felt both exhilarating and perilous. She opened her mouth to respond, but her voice faltered as the weight of her impending decision pressed down on her. If I risk being vulnerable, how do I trust that you won't hurt me, Malik? The question bubbled up, raw and unfiltered. The corner of his mouth quirked up, an elusive smile that sent her heart racing still. Trust is a fragile thing. It takes time to build and even less to shatter. Then why should I? Her challenge was firm, yet she felt her resolve flicker in the heat of his gaze. Because I'm not the man your fiancé painted me to be. He drew closer, his whisper resonating in the confined space. And I'm not just your late fiancé's brother. I'm here to protect you, not to bind you to chains. Outside, a butler ushered guests away from the entryway, their laughter ringing out like bells heralding chaos. But within the cocoon of the drawing room, it was just the two of them, alone in the charged silence, where their unspoken connection could spark or fizzle. The flames danced higher, illuminating Cleo's profile as she turned her head slightly, unable to maintain the intensity of his gaze. I can't get involved with my late fiancé's family, Malik. It feels wrong. Then don't get involved with the past, he replied gently, and in that moment, tenderness broke through his hardened exterior. Get involved with the present. Get involved with me. Cleo's heart thundered in her chest, and she took a breath, facing him fully. This isn't just a game, Malik. It's my life. Yours too. Then let's rewrite the rules together. As the shadows grew darker around them, Cleo felt the undeniable pull of temptation and fear. The laughter outside faded, replaced by the soft crackling of the fire igniting the air with possibilities. The world around them was chaos, yet in this fractured moment, something precious flickered into existence, a vision of love, thick with uncertainty, but shimmering with promise. Together, she finally whispered, closing the distance just a fraction, heart thumping with new rhythm, unsure but yearning for the leap. Scene 30. The test of loyalty. The air inside the dimly lit tavern was thick with tension, a blend of sweat, smoke, and the coppery scent of spilled ale. Shadows danced across the walls, flickering with the flick of candlelight as patrons huddled over their drinks, voices raised in heated conversations. Outside, a storm brewed, dark clouds rolling over the town like an omen. Cleo Seke perched at the corner of a weather-beaten table, her heart racing, echoing the tempest that threatened to unleash all around them. Malik Orpheus leaned against the rough-hewn wall beside her, his expression intense, eyes scanning the entrance as if expecting danger. His broad shoulders taut, he emanated an electric energy, each pulse of his body signaling that he was ready for anything, except perhaps the truth waiting just a heartbeat away. Cleo, we shouldn't be here, he warned, his voice low and urgent. though it held an underlying current of something else. Was it protectiveness or something more uncertain? But we have to, she countered sharply, her dark eyes locking onto his with unyielding determination. The clues we need point to this place. You can't keep trying to shield me from everything, Malik. His brows furrowed, frustration igniting like a spark. It's not about shielding you. It's about keeping you safe. This world you're trying to navigate, it can't be trusted. He paused, a shadow passing over his face. I can't lose anyone else. For a moment, vulnerability slipped through his carefully built defenses. Cleo glimpsed the haunted past behind his bravado, and it loosened something deep within her. A tight grip of resentment she had held since her fiancé's betrayal stirred into an undercurrent of empathy. You won't lose me, she said softly, her voice almost lost in the chaos around them. But you have to let me breathe. Let me choose my own fights. In that delicate space between anger and aching understanding, their gazes held even despite the din of the surrounding tavern. The world melted away, leaving only their heartbeat thrumming in the still air. Just then, a rough group of men swaggered into the tavern, laughter spilling from their lips like foul perfume. Malik immediately shifted, standing slightly in front of Cleo, his body a shield. This isn't good, he muttered, his focus unwavering, cutting through the haze of her thoughts on freedom and choice. But Cleo felt her resolve harden, a bolt of defiance igniting her spirit. You think I can't handle myself? That I'd fold like a house of cards under pressure? That's not what I meant, he snapped back, the tension in his voice echoing in the air as the men approached their table. The lead thug, grinning with a jagged tooth protruding like a broken promise, towered over them. Well, what do we have here? A little dove and her protector? How quaint. Malik shifted his stance but kept his voice steady, determination threading through. We're not interested in your games. Move along. The group exchanged knowing glances, but instead of backing down, they stepped closer, eyes twinkling with malicious challenge. Cleo felt her pulse quicken, the danger palpable yet inviting, a part of her wanting to leap into the fray. It was the thrill of the fight paired with the heart-thundering allure of Malik's presence beside her. Who do you think you're talking to, pretty boy? The thug sneered, reaching toward Cleo, fingers outstretched. But in a flash, Malik moved. With a single smooth motion, he gripped the thug's wrist, twisting it behind his back and yanking him close. The sudden silence that fell over the tavern crackled with tension, all eyes turning to them. Her heart raced as she felt the rush of adrenaline tinged with fear for Malik, her protector, on the edge of violence. Cleo, go, Malik commanded, his voice firm but laced with an unspoken plea, something deeper flaring in his dark gaze. No, I'm not leaving you, she defied, igniting the fierce spirit buried within her. You can't just make decisions for me. The fight escalated, bodies colliding, and in the clamor of chaos, a crushing realization hit both of them, swamping their fierce exchanges. Beneath the shouts and slams of knuckles on flesh, their connection intensified, a bond forged in the heat of battle, and it was unforgivingly raw and achingly real. Malik's eyes met hers, shimmering with the intensity of unshed emotions as the scuffle flared behind them. I would do anything for you, he whispered, the confession almost lost in the fray. Then let me choose this fight, Cleo replied, feeling emboldened by her place at his side. A heady mix of fear and exhilaration collided as Malik's grip on her shifted, both of them now reframed against the backdrop of brewing conflict, united in purpose. In that electric moment, they were more than just allies. They were two souls, tangled in the whirlwind of emotions and revelations, fighting not just for survival, but for something far deeper. They were poised at the brink of unity, a fledgling promise amid the roaring chaos. Together, then, he said, his voice steady, the weight of his decision unfurling at her heart. Let's finish what we started. Scene 31. Rising tensions. The twilight air outside the Whitmore estate held a deceptive allure as Cleo Seke stepped into the garden, her heart thundering with a conflicting rhythm of dread and exhilaration. Here, amidst the fragrant jasmine and laughter of the highborn, a storm raged beneath the polished surfaces of their lives. Cleo could taste it, the bitterness of secrets mingling with the sweetness of rose petals. She had been the perfect lady all evening, poised and congenial, but the reality of her engagement loomed like a shadow around her neck, weighty and suffocating. "Are you with us, darling?" A voice cut through her fog. It was Lady Fitzwilliam, all silk and sharpness, flicking her fan with unnerving grace. The tension in her smile hinted at her awareness of Cleo's faltering composure. "Of course," Cleo replied, forcing herself into the moment, but her mind drifted, seeking the escape that lay beyond the manicured hedges, beyond Malik Orpheus, the enigma wrapped in charisma, waiting just out of sight. At that moment, Malik appeared, tall and commanding amidst the polished crowd, his dark eyes catching hers across the garden as if pulling her into an unspoken command. His presence was a soothing balm against the chaos that fluttered within her. She excused herself, eager for the clarity he possessed, even as the dissonance of their worlds tugged at her consciousness. "Cleo." The richness of his voice enveloped her as she came closer, the finality of his gaze sending shivers down her spine. He offered a half-smile that danced between mischief and sincerity. "Your fiancé seems rather eager for your attention." Cleo frowned slightly, the casual mention of Whitmore prickling her nerves. "He's merely entertaining his guests. I'm only part of the decor." Her words floated into the air as breaths of weighted irony, but she masked the trembling of her heart behind a sharp laugh. "I wouldn't insult you by calling you decor," Malik replied, stepping closer, the heat radiating from him, stirring something long dormant deep within her. "You spark the very room you enter." That unguarded compliment wrapped around her, igniting an energy she had almost forgotten. The world behind them buzzed with frivolous chatter, but in this moment, it all faded into a hum, leaving just the two of them cocooned in a bubble of connection. Their chemistry crackled, the tension tangible as his hand brushed against hers, sending an electric thrill coursing through them both. "Cleo," he started, but a rush of laughter erupted behind them, cutting through the intimacy like glass shattering in silence. A group of men, Whitmore's friends, were recounting their latest exploits, their laughter spilling into the cool air as a challenge. "Did you hear? They say Wilkins can't outrun his own shadows at this point," one shouted, eliciting roaring laughter. Cleo flinched instinctively, her thoughts dragging toward the darker stories lurking just beneath the surface of their society. "I'm quite convinced that Wilkins finds solace in being chaste," Malik muttered, an amused glint in his eye, as he tore his gaze from the folly, returning to her. Cleo was taken aback by his levity but couldn't quell the weight settling deeper in her chest. "Do you think they realize the monster they dance with?" she asked quietly, the words trembling with hidden narrative. Malik's expression hardened momentarily, the lightness fading. "They are blind to the risks. It's easy to live behind a mask." He paused, studying her face. "Even your own, Cleo." Her breath hitched, caught between the echoes of her past choices and the fierce determination taking root in her heart. "What if I'm not sure how to remove it?" In one fluid motion, he reached for her hand, the warmth of his grip grounding and conspiratorial. "Then let me show you." The air hung heavy, pregnant with promise. She could feel the sizzling anticipation, the playful banter of their peers muffled by the distance of their entangled thoughts. Leaning in closer, he lowered his voice, the intimacy brushing against her skin like a whispered incantation. "All that glitters in this garden is not gold, Cleo." "Then what are we waiting for?" she replied, a spark igniting in her chest. And just like that, they were no longer bound by the frivolities around them, but rather intertwined in something deeper, something primal and undeniable. Their fingers intertwined as the world blurred, and nothing but their tension remained, the thrill of secrets brewing in the night's embrace. Cleo's heart raced as it dawned on her that sometimes stepping into the fire was the only way to truly feel alive. Scene 32, Cleo's daring move. The chandeliers in the grand ballroom glimmered like stars suspended in a twilight sky, their light refracting through the fluttering silks of the guests' attire, illuminating faces of laughter, consequence, and desire. Cleo Seke stood at the heart of the room, her back against the cool marble of the wall, her fingers clutching a beaded invitation as she soaked in the cacophony of laughter and clinking glasses. Beneath the veneer of amusement, her heart thumped like a war drum, determination coiled within her, taut and fierce. A slow scan of the room revealed the familiar features of the elite, Men in impeccably tailored frocks, women shimmering in elaborate gowns, each more dazzling than the last. And there, at the far end, leaning nonchalantly against the edge of an ornately carved table, stood Malik Orpheus, a figure of enigmatic charm cloaked in his own shadows. Their eyes met, and suddenly the world around her faded into a soft blur, leaving only the weight of his gaze deep, intense, a tether to her unresolved aspirations. "I can't keep pretending everything's fine," Cleo muttered, voice barely above the hushed conversations swirling like a tempest. She tilted her head towards Malik, their unspoken bond enveloping them like a cloak. Malik's jaw tightened, a reflex against the tide of her determination. "Seke, you don't have to shoulder this alone. There are safer routes." "But aren't you the one who told me courage is born from action?" Cleo interjected, her tone challenging. The spark of rebellion flickered in her chest, invigorating her spirit. He pushed off from the table, a subtle shift that closed the distance between them. "This isn't a game, Cleo. Whitmore's corruption runs deeper than you can imagine. If you step too close, you might get burned." Cleo narrowed her eyes, her fingers brushing the cool fabric of her gown as she considered her next move. With a subtle nod, she straightened her spine, the weight of tradition neither suffocating nor unwelcome. "I'm tired of being pawed at like a pawn in someone else's scheme. I deserve to be more." The specter of her late fiancé's indifference loomed behind her, casting a shadow that clawed at her self-worth. With each heartbeat, an increasingly anxious rhythm urged her to confront the darkness surrounding Whitmore.